I want you to stand up tall and proud. I want you to speak up clear and loud. Brown baby.
What's going on, everybody? As promised, this is going to be my third installment of It's All Connected. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Moynihan Report and why it's so important to what's going on today, as it predicted everything that's going on right now. This man here, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, predicted what we're going through as a community today. And a lot of people try to call this report racist because of its revelations about how our community works, as opposed to how people believe it works. It contradicts a lot of firmly held beliefs about how our community works, but it speaks nothing but the truth. Senator Moynihan used the data gathered from E. Franklin Frazier and other Black sociologists and psychologists who also came to the same conclusion, actually came to the conclusion before he made his report. So he used their data and also current data, and it all was leading to the same conclusions. So when he put this report out, it was in order to isolate the cause for the breakdown in the Black family, how best to help the Black family to be resilient. And what he found was profound, and a lot of people don't like it, and it's because of probably the time when it came out. There were it was a movement that was running parallel to when he released this report. That I think once you see how this took place and why certain powers came into effect to try to silence this report. I'd like to thank everybody who watched the first two. If you hadn't gone back and watched the very first video that I did on the 1 million women and Goldman Sachs, please go and watch that one. And like I said, they're all connected. And you see you can compare and contrast yourself how one program was treated as opposed to the other program. Although Both programs are trying to do something good for the community, for Black people. But it seems like the only ones that are successful are the ones who seek to elevate Black women. So the question that we're asking is why? Why can we not have two concurrent equal programs that are helping Black men and Black women so that it helps the community, as opposed to putting one element of the community out of reach of the other one? I mean, it's only common sense, and anybody who doesn't see it from that perspective is characterized in the Moynihan Report by the Moynihan scissors. When given the choice, these Black women, and it's not all Black women, but some of these Black women choose the money over being in a relationship, a healthy relationship with a man, and raising their family. Because everything else is more important. The flash, the sass, the trips, the Instagram life is more important. Even before Instagram was even around, we saw that the culture, the flashing lights seems to be more alluring than having a healthy relationship and actually building with a man and living within your means and having a happy life. Now it's everybody can have $1 million. Everybody's going to be on top. There's room for everybody at the top of the mountain, and it's unrealistic, and it's always been there. So let's take a look at this report, and it's pretty long. I'm going to try to get through the whole thing. Hopefully it's not too long, and you guys don't get bored with it. But it is necessary information. And you guys should be teaching your boys about this too, because it's it's relevant. Very relevant. So here you see Moynihan Report, an annotated edition. A historian unpacks the Negro family and the case for national action on its 50th anniversary. Okay, this was in 2015. Okay. On New Year's Eve, 1964, Assistant Secretary of Labor Daniel Patrick Moynihan assembled his staff in his office to announce that they were going to help him write a report on African American families. The Negro Family, the Case for National Action, completed in March 1965, became one of the most controversial documents of the 20th century. Best known as the Moynihan Report, it launched the career of its author, who became a professor at Harvard University, a top advisor to President Nixon, and a four-term U.S. Senator representing New York. Moynihan wrote the report on his own initiative, hoping to persuade White House officials that civil rights legislation alone would not produce racial equality. He succeeded in getting President Johnson's attention. On June 1965, President Lyndon Johnson gave a major address at Howard University based largely on the Moynihan Report, and co-written by Moynihan and Richard Goodwin. Echoing civil rights leaders of the time, Johnson declared freedom is not enough. Equal citizenship for African Americans was incomplete without the ability to make a decent living. However, the Johnson administration quickly disowned the Moynihan Report when it sparked a heated debate after becoming public in August 1965. Distracted by the Vietnam War, Johnson never followed up his string of rhetoric at Howard with significant new policies. The Moynihan Report became a lightning rod for civil rights activists frustrated with Johnson's inaction. Moreover, the report's ambiguities and contradictions, as well as Moynihan's decision to discuss racial inequality primarily in terms of family structure, produce confusion over its aims. Many liberals understood the report to advocate new policies to alleviate race-based economic inequalities, but conservatives found in the report a convenient nationalization for inequality. They argued that only racial self-help could produce the necessary changes in family structure. Some even used the report to reinforce racist stereotypes about loose family morality among African Americans. Meanwhile, left-wing critics attacked Moynihan for distracting attention from ongoing systemic racism by focusing on the African American family characteristics. Moynihan's leading critic, William Ryan, famously charged him with blaming the victim. Wow. There's always a guy that's just waiting to jump out there and protect, because the victim, well, I'll save it for later. The Moynihan Report is a historical artifact best understood in the context of its time, yet it remains relevant today amongst current discussion of why racial inequality persists despite the passage of civil rights legislation. Even those who do not see the report's analysis as pertinent to the present can learn how it shaped contemporary discourse. 50 years later, the Moynihan Report is still a contested symbol among American thinkers and policymakers. Cited by everyone from Barack Obama to Paul Ryan, earlier this month, New York City Police Commissioner and Mayor publicly sparred over the report, with the former calling it precedent and the latter dismissing it as outdated. Liberals and conservatives alike praise the report's analysis, but it is still an anathema to many on the left. Okay, to aid readers interested in exploring the report and the issues it raised, The Atlantic has published this annotated copy of the Negro Family. Please note that this version differs from the original in many of the report's tables and charts are not reproduced. Okay, so it is the report, but they do not have the charts. Okay, but if you want to see the full report, I think I have a copy of it that I'm going to add to the description, and so that you will be able to see those. And you can also find those tables on PBS's website, which I'll add those as well. Okay. The Negro Family and the Case for National Action, Office of Policy Planning and Research, United States Department of Labor. The United States is approaching a new crisis in race relations. In the decade that began with the school desegregation decision of the Supreme Court and ended with the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, the demand of Negro Americans for full recognition of their civil rights was finally met. The effort, no matter how savage and brutal, of some states and local governments to thwart the exercise of those rights is doomed. The nation will not put up with it, least of all the Negroes. The present moment will pass. In the meantime, a new period is beginning. In this new period, the expectations of the Negro Americans will go beyond civil rights. Being Americans, they will now expect that in the near future, equal opportunities for them as a group will produce roughly equal results as compared with other groups. This is not going to happen, nor will it happen for generations to come unless a new and special effort is made. There are two reasons. First, the racist virus in the American bloodstream still afflicts us. Negroes will encounter serious personal prejudice for at least another generation. Second, 3 centuries of sometimes unimaginable mistreatment have taken their toll on the Negro people. The harsh fact is that as a group, at the present time, in terms of ability to win out in the competitions of American life, they are not equal to most of those groups with which they will be competing. Individually, Negro Americans reach the highest peaks of achievement, but collectively, in the spectrum of the American ethic, and religious and regional groups, where some get plenty and some get none, where some send 80% of their children to college and others pull them out of school at the 8th grade. Negroes are among the weakest. The most difficult fact for white Americans to understand is that in these terms, the circumstances of the Negro American community in recent years has probably been getting worse, not better. Indices of dollar, income, standards of living, and years of education deceive. The gap between Negroes and most other groups in American society is widening. The fundamental problem in which this is most clearly the case is that of family structure. The evidence, not final, but powerfully persuasive, is that the Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle-class group has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled, poorly educated city working class, the fabric of the conventional social relationship has all but disintegrated. There are indications that the situation may have been arrested in the past few years, but the general post-war trend is unmistakable. So long as the situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. The thesis of this paper is that these events, in combination, confront the nation with a new kind of problem. Measures that have worked in the past or would work for most groups in the present will not work here. A national effort is required that will give a unity of purpose to the many activities of the federal government in this area, directed to a new kind of national goal, the establishment of a stable Negro family structure. This will be a new departure for federal policy and a difficult one, but it almost certainly offers the only possibility of resolving in our time what is, after all, the nation's oldest and most intransient and now its most dangerous social problem. What the Gunnar Myrdal said in An American Dilemma remains true today. America is free to choose whether the Negro shall remain her liability or become her opportunity. Chapter 1, The Negro American Revolution. The Negro American Revolution is regularly regarded as the most important domestic event of the post-war period in the United States. Nothing like it has occurred since the upheavals of the 1930s, which led to the organization of the great industrial trade unions, and which in turn profoundly altered both the economy and the political scene. There have been few other events in our history, the American Revolution itself, the surge of the Jacksonian democracy in the 1830s, the abolitionist movement, and the populist movement of the 19th century comparable to the current Negro movement. There has been none more important. The Negro American Revolution holds forth the prospect that the American Republic, which at birth was flawed by the institution of Negro slavery, and which throughout its history has been marred by the unequal treatment of Negro citizens, will at last redeem the full promise of the Declaration of Independence. Although the Negro leadership has conducted itself with the strictest propriety, acting always and only as American citizens, asserting their rights within the framework of the American political system, it is no less clear that the movement has profound international implications. It was in no way a matter of chance that the nonviolent tactics and philosophy of the movement, as it began in the South, were consciously adapted from the techniques by which the Congress Party undertook to free the Indian nation from the British colonial rule. It was not a matter of chance that the Negro movement caught fire in America at just that moment when the nations of Africa were gaining their freedom. Nor is it merely an incidental that the world should have fastened its attention on events in the United States at a time when the possibility that the nations of the world will divide along color lines seems suddenly not only possible, but even imminent. Such racist views have made progress within the Negro American community itself, which can hardly be expected to be immune to a virus that is endemic in the white community. The Black Muslim doctrines, based on total alienation from the white world, exert a powerful influence. On the far left, the attraction of Chinese communism can no longer be ignored. So basically what he's saying by that is he's saying that, we can fix this problem, or, these people may look at these more volatile alternatives as a means to obtain a better footing in this, this society. And I'm sure that scared the crap out of a lot of people. They could go communist, or either they can go Black Muslim, so that scared them to death. Okay, so it is clear that what happens in America is being taken as a sign of what can or must happen in the world at large. The course of world events will be profoundly affected by the success or failure of the Negro American Revolution in seeking up the peaceful assimilation of the races in the United States. The award of the Nobel Peace Prize to Dr. Martin Luther King was as much an expression of the hope for the future as it was recognition for past achievement. Okay. It is no less clear that carrying this revolution forward to a successful conclusion is a first priority confronting the Great Society. The end of the beginning. The major events of the onset of the Negro Revolution are now behind us. The political events were three. First, the Negroes themselves organized as a mass movement. Their organization has been in some ways better disciplined and better led than any in our history. They have established an unprecedented alliance with religious groups throughout the nation and have maintained close ties with both political parties and with most segments of the trade union movement. Second, the Kennedy-Johnson administration committed the federal government to the cause of Negro equality. This had never happened before. Third, in 1964 presidential election, the 1964 presidential election was practically a referendum on this commitment. If these were terms made by the opposition, they were in effect accepted by the president. Okay. The overwhelming victory of President Johnson must be taken as emphatic popular endorsement of the unmistakable and openly avowed course which the federal government has pursued under his leadership. The administrative events were threefold as well. First, beginning with the establishment of the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity and on the enactment of the Manpower Development and Training Act of 1962. The federal government has launched a major national effort to redress the profound imbalances between the economic position of the Negro citizens and the rest of the nation that derives primarily from their unequal positions in the labor market. Second, the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 began as a major national effort to abolish poverty, a condition in which almost half of Negro families are living. Third, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 marked the end of the era of legal and formal discrimination against Negroes and created important new machinery for combating covert discrimination and unequal treatment. The act does not guarantee an end to harassment in matters such as voter registration, but does make it more or less incumbent upon the government to take further steps to thwart such efforts when they do occur. That's relevant to today. That's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the same things that were happening in the 1960s and that were addressed in 1964 are happening today. And the government's doing nothing about it. Okay, the legal events were no less specific, beginning with Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, though the decade that culminated in the recent decisions upholding Title II of the Civil Rights Act, the federal judiciary, led by the Supreme Court, has used every opportunity to combat unequal treatment of Negro citizens. It may be put as a general proposition that the laws of the United States now look upon any such treatment as obnoxious, and that the courts will strike it down wherever it appears. The demand for equality. With these events behind us, the nation now faces a different set of challenges, which may prove more difficult to meet, if only because they cannot be cast as concrete positions of right and wrong. The fundamental problem here is that the Negro Revolution, like the industrial upheaval of the 1930s, is a movement for equality as well as for liberty. Okay. Liberty and equality are twin ideals of American democracy, but they are not the same thing, nor most importantly are they equally attractive to all groups at any given time, nor yet are they always compatible, one with the other. Many persons who would gladly die for liberty are appalled by equality. Many who are devoted to equality are puzzled and even troubled by liberty. Much of the political history of the American nation can be seen as a competition between these two ideas. As, for example, the unending troubles between capital and labor. By and large, liberty has been the ideal with the higher social prestige in America. It has been the middle class aspiration par excellence. Note the assertions of the conservative right that ours is a republic, not a democracy. Equality, on the other hand, has enjoyed tolerance more than acceptance, yet it has roots deep in Western civilization and is at least coeval with, if not prior to, liberty in the history of the Western political thought. American democracy has not always been successful in maintaining balance between these two ideals. Notably, so where the Negro American is concerned, Lincoln freed the slaves, but they were given liberty, not equality. It was therefore possible in the century that followed to deprive their descendants of much of their liberty as well. The ideal of equality does not ordain that all persons end up as well as start out equal. The traditional terms, as put by Faulkner, there is no such thing as equality per se, but only equality to equal right and opportunity to make the best one can of one's life within one's capability, without fear of injustice or oppression, or threat of violence. But the evolution of American politics, with the distinct persistence of ethnic and religious groups, has added a profoundly significant new dimension to the egalitarian ideal. It is increasingly demanded that the distribution of success and failure within one group be roughly comparable to that within other groups. It is not enough that all individuals start out on even terms if the members of one group almost invariably end up well to the fore than those of another far to the rear. This is what ethnic politics are all about in America. And in the main, Negro American demands are being put forth in this now traditional and established framework. Okay. Here, a point of semantics must be grasped. The demand for equality of opportunity has been generally perceived by white Americans as a demand for liberty and a demand not to be excluded from the competitions of life. At the polling place, in the scholarship examination, at the personal office, on the housing market, liberty does, of course, demand that everyone be free to try his luck or test his skill in such matters. But these opportunities do not necessarily produce equality. On the contrary, the extent that winners imply losers equally of opportunity almost ensures inequality of results. The point of semantics is that equality of opportunity now has a different meaning for Negroes than it has for whites. It is not, or at least no longer, a demand for liberty alone, but also equality. In terms of group results, in Bayard Rustin's terms, it is now concerned not merely with removing the barriers of full opportunity, but with achieving the fact of equality. By equality, Rustin means distribution of achievement among Negroes roughly comparable to those among whites. As Nathan Glazer has put it, the demand for economic equality is now not the demand for equal opportunities for the equally qualified. It is now the demand for equality of economic results. The demand for equality in education has also become a demand for equality of results of outcomes. Okay, another point that's relevant today. I mean, we got people paying to get their kids in college, whereas black kids are having to, score, extremely high to get into these colleges, whereas it looks like the precedent the whole time has been that people have been paying to get their kids into these, these high-end colleges. Okay, some aspects of the new laws do guarantee results in the sense that upon enactment, the enforcement they bring about an objective that is an end in itself, e.g. the public accommodations titles of the Civil Rights Act. Other provisions are at once terminal and intermediary. The proportions of the Civil Rights Act dealing with voting rights will no doubt lead to further enlargements of the freedom of the Negro American. But we're still fighting for voting rights acts in 2021. Okay, but by and large, the programs that have been enacted in the first phase of the Negro Revolution, manpower, retraining, the Job Corps, community action, at all, only make opportunities available. They cannot ensure the outcome. The principal challenge of the next phase of the Negro Revolution is to make certain that equality of results will now follow. If we do not, there will be no social peace in the United States for generations. Okay, the prospect of equality. The time, therefore, is at hand for an unflinching look at the present potential of the Negro Americans to move from where they now are to where they want and ought to be. There is no very satisfactory way to present at present to measure social health or social pathology within an ethnic or religious or geographical community. Data are few and uncertain, and conclusions drawn from them include the conclusions that follow are subject to grossest error. Nonetheless, the opportunities no less than the dangers of the present moment demand that an assessment be made. That being the case, and this is italicized, has to be said that there is a considerable body of evidence to support the conclusion that Negro social structure, in particular the Negro family, battered and harassed by discrimination, injustice, and uprooting, is in the deepest trouble. While many young Negroes are moving ahead to unprecedented levels of achievement, many more are falling farther and farther behind. After an intensive study of the life of Central Harlem, the board of directors of Harlem's Youth Opportunities Unlimited, Inc. summed up their findings in one statement: massive deterioration of the fabric of society and its institutions. It is the conclusion of this survey of the available national data that what is true of Central Harlem can be said to be true of the Negro American world in general. If this is so, it is the single most important social fact of the United States today. Okay. As much as possible, the statistics used in this paper refer to Negroes. However, certain data series are available only in terms of white and non-white population. Where this is the case, the non-white data have been used as if they were referred only to Negroes. This necessarily introduces some inaccuracies, but it does not appear to produce any significant distortions. In the 1960s, Negroes were 92.1% of all non-whites. The remaining 7.9% is made up largely of Indians, Japanese, and Chinese. The combined male unemployment rates of these groups is lower than that of the Negroes. In matters relating to family stability, the smaller groups are probably more stable. Thus, 21% of Negro women who have ever married are separated, divorced, or their husbands are absent for other reasons. The comparable figure for Indians is 14%, Japanese 7%, Chinese 6%. Therefore, the statistics on non-whites generally understate the degree of disorganization of the Negro family and underemployment of Negro men. Let's see if I have that. I don't have that table. Okay, Chapter 2, the Negro American family. At the heart of the deterioration of the fabric of Negro society is the deterioration of the Negro family. It is the fundamental source of the weakness of the Negro community at the present time. There is probably no single fact of Negro American life that is so little understood by whites. The Negro situation is commonly perceived by whites in terms of the visible manifestations of discrimination and poverty, in part because Negro protest is directed against such obstacles, and in part, no doubt, because these are facts which involve the actions and attitudes of the white community as well. It is more difficult, however, for whites to perceive the effect that the 3 centuries of exploitation have had on the fabric of Negro society itself. Here, the consequences of the historic injustices done to Negro Americans are silent and hidden from view. But here is where the true injury has occurred. Unless this damage is repaired, all of the effort to end discrimination and poverty and injustice will come to little. The role of the family in shaping character and the ability is so pervasive as to be easily overlooked. The family is the basic social unit of the American family. It is the basic socializing unit as well. By and large, adult conduct in society is learned as a child. The fundamental insight of psychoanalytic theory, for example, is that the child learns a way of looking at life in his early years through which all later experience is viewed and which profoundly shapes his adult conduct. It may be hazarded that the reason family structure does not loom larger in public discussion of social issues is that people tend to assume that the nature of family life is about the same throughout American society. The mass media and the development of suburbia have created an image of the American family as a highly standardized phenomenon. It is therefore easy to assume that whatever it is that makes for differences amongst individuals or groups of individuals, it is not a different family structure. There is much truth to this. As with any other nation, Americans are producing recognizable family system. But the process is not completed by any means. There are still important differences in family patterns surviving from the age of the great European migration to the United States, and these variations account for notable differences in the progress and assimilation of various ethnic and religious groups. A number of immigrant groups were characterized by unusually strong family bonds. These groups have characteristically progressed more rapidly than others. But there is one truly great, discontinuity in family structure in the United States. At the present time, that between the white world in general and that of the Negro American. The white family has achieved a high degree of stability and is maintaining that stability. By contrast, the family structure of the lower class Negroes is highly unstable and in many urban centers is approaching complete breakdown. Okay, NB, there is considerable evidence that the Negro community is in fact dividing between stable middle class group that is steadily growing stronger and more successful, and an increasingly disorganized and disadvantaged lower class group. There are indications, for example, that the middle class Negro family puts a higher premium on family stability and conserving of family resources than does the white middle class family. The discussion of this paper is not obviously directed to the first group, excepting as it is affected by the experiences of the second, an important exception. Okay. See Chapter 4, The Tangle of Pathology. Okay, there are 2 points to be noted in this context. The first, emergency and increasing visibility of the Negro middle class may beguile the nation into supposing that the circumstances of the remainder of the Negro community are equally prosperous, whereas just the opposite is true at present and is likely to continue. The second, the lumping of all Negroes together in one statistical measurement very probably conceals the extent of the disorganization among the lower class groups. If conditions are improving for one and the deteriorating for the other, the resultant statistical averages might show no change. Further, the statistics on the Negro family and most of most other subjects treated in this paper refer only to a specific point in time. They are a vertical measure of the situation at a given movement. They do not measure the experience of individuals over time. Thus, the average monthly unemployment rate for Negro males in 1964 is recorded as 9%. But during 1964, some 29% of Negro males were unemployed. At one time or another, similarly, for example, if 36% of Negro children are living in broken homes at any specific moment, it is likely that a far higher proportion of Negro children find themselves in that situation at one time or another in their lives. Nearly a quarter of the urban Negro marriages are dissolved. More than that today. Nearly a quarter of Negro women living in cities who have ever married are divorced, separated, or are living apart from their husbands. The rates are higher in the urban Northeast, where 26% of Negro women ever married are either divorced, separated, or have their husbands absent. On the urban frontier, the proportion of husbands absent is even higher. In New York City in 1960, it was 30.2%, not including divorces. Among even married white women in the nation, the proportion with husbands present declined in every age group over a decade, 1950 to 1960, as follows, and the chart's not reproduced. Although similar declines occurred among white females, the proportion of white husbands present never dropped below 90%, except for the first and last age group. Nearly 1/4 of Negro births are now illegitimate. Both white and Negro illegitimacy rates have been increasing, although from dramatically different bases. The white rate was 2% in 1940. It was 3.07% in 1963. In that period, the Negro rate went from 16.8% to 23.6%. So you see where when black people say that, white people catch a cold, we get the flu, that's what they mean. Anytime something is hurting the white community, we tend to catch it a lot worse. Okay, the number of illegitimate children per 1,000 live births increased by 11 among whites in the period from 1940 to 1963, but 68 among non-whites. There are, of course, limits to the dependability of these statistics. There are almost certainly a considerable number of Negro children who, although technically illegitimate, are in fact the offspring of stable unions. On the other hand, it may be assumed that many births that are in fact illegitimate are recorded otherwise. Probably the two opposite effects cancel each other out. Okay, on the urban frontier, the non-white illegitimate rates are usually higher than the national average. The increase of late has been drastic. In the District of Columbia, the illegitimacy rate for non-whites grew from 21.8% in 1950 to 29.5% in 1964. A similar picture of disintegrating Negro marriages emerges from the divorce statistics. Divorces have increased of late for both whites and non-whites, but at a much greater rate for the latter. Okay, in 1940, both groups had a divorce rate of 2.2%. By 1964, the white rate had risen to 3.6%, but the non-white rate had reached 5.1%, 40% greater than the formerly equal white rates. Almost 1/4 of Negro families are headed by females. That's significant. We talk about that a lot. Read that again. Almost 1/4 of Negro families are headed by females. As a direct result of this high rate of divorce, separation, and desertion, a family large a very large percentage of Negro families are headed by females, while the percentage of such families among whites has been dropping since 1940. It has been rising amongst Negroes. The percent of non-white families headed by female is more than double the percent for whites. Fatherless non-white families increased by a sixth between 1950 and 1960, but held constant for white families. And then they have a chart down here. That's us at the top. All that winning. That's that winning that women always talk about right there. You know? That number is bigger today. So as you can see, you know, the relevance of this study is that everything that he predicted and everything that he was talking about during that time has gotten even worse during this time. And the thing that was going on during that same time was this right here. Second wave of feminism, 1960s, women's liberation movement. Women's rights movement, also called the women's liberation movement, diverse social movement, largely based in the United States in 1960s and 1970s, sought equal rights and opportunities and greater personal freedoms for women. It coincided with and is recognized as part of the second wave of feminism. Okay. So the 1960s up to the 1970s, that's a significant period of time. Okay. They're changing women's minds about marriage and about being at home and taking care of their children and all of that. And then in the 70s, they moved into the academy. That's when they started getting into the social sciences, you know, and starting to teach their the feminist tenets to the young ladies. And then by this time, this is when, you know, folks in their 50s started getting these notions into their head, who were brought about by Betty Friedan. Okay. So they start putting certain key points in the women's heads, you know. If you guys aren't watching Gigi's channel and Dr. T.S.R. Johnson, they cover that extensively, and B.J.S. Ibmore. They cover this extensively about the things and the changes that were instituted because of this movement. You know, we already had things going on, but these things were exacerbated by this movement. Okay, let's go back. It has been estimated that only a minority of Negro children reach the age of 18, having lived all their lives with both of their parents. Same thing going on today. You know, a lot of women who claim to be independent and not needing men, they feel like they can have a child and raise that child on their own and not raise that child in the family. You know, we just had a prominent, feminist Black lady come out here within the last few days that said that basically the traditional family is not necessary anymore. It's not necessary. You know, so if these people aren't trying to destroy what is statistically proven to be a stable environment for children and the best environment for children to be raised in, you know, then I don't know what else what other conclusion I can come to. Okay. Oh, sorry, y'all. This is long. So, okay, the breakdown of Negro family has led to a startling increase in welfare dependency. This is significant as well, because then we're going to start getting into Moynihan scissors, you know, and that's another important finding of this report. Okay, the majority of Negro children have received public assistance under AFDC program at one point or another in their childhood. At present, 14% of Negro children are receiving AFDC assistance, as against 2% of white children. 8% of white children receive such assistance at some time, as against 56% of non-whites, according to an exploration based on HEW data. Let it be noted, however, that out of a total of 1.8 million non-white illegitimate children in the nation in 1961, 1.3 million were not receiving aid under AFDC program. Although a substantial number have or will receive aid at some time in their lives, again, the situation may be said to be worsening. AFDC programs deriving from the long-established Mother's Aid programs established in 1935, principally to care for the widows and orphans, although the legislation covered all children in homes deprived of parental support because one or both of their parents are absent or incapacitated. So that's significant as well. Those Mother's Aid programs were established for widows and orphans, not for women who don't want to be married and who choose to leave their marriages. You know, that's not the total number, but that's a large number of them who were being, taken care of under these programs. Okay, in the beginning, the number of AFDC families in which the father was absent because of desertion was less than a third of the total. Today, it's 2/3. So why is that significant? Why are men deserting women? Why were they deserting them? We talk about a lot of those things today. A lot of those things you couldn't talk about back in the past, But you have to take into consideration that, men aren't just running around just leaving their families for no reason. A man has to be a provider. A man has to be respected in his home. His position as leader of the family has to be respected. If that's not the case, and especially if this movement is going on during the same time and telling women that they don't have to do that, which this was around the time of first wave feminism, moving up into the other ones. Okay. All right. So let's go down to the chart here. Okay. Cases opened up under AFDC compared to with unemployment rate for non-whites. Okay. So here, this shows the non-white unemployment, which means black unemployment was down. AFDC cases, this is where Moynihan scissors comes in. Here's the scissors. Whereas every other group, when the unemployment rate for the man went down, so did the application for AFDC benefits. That went down also. And what that would mean is that correlation in the drop would mean that the women didn't need the benefits because the men were working. So they stayed with the husband. But in this case, you see the unemployment rate's down for the men, but the women take the money and run. You see where that's what that indicates. So this perplexed Moynihan right here. What is this? What's going on here? Why is this happening? And it's not happening with any other group in the country. It's not happening with the Chinese, with the Hispanics. It's not happening with the white people. I mean, what's going on here? Why on earth would the black women take the benefits and not the husband? And that's because they want to be independent of a man doing what they want to do. See? Regardless of what's best for that child. That's what that indicates right there. Okay. A 1960 study of aid to dependent children in Cook County, Illinois, stated the typical ADC mother in Cook County was married and had children by her husband, who deserted. So he left her. Okay. His whereabouts are unknown. He does not contribute to the support of the children. She is not free to remarry and has had an illegitimate child since her husband left. Ooh. So she had a child by somebody else since her husband left. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but they're saying she had an illegitimate child since he left her. Okay. Almost 90% of the ADC families are Negro. The steady expansion of the welfare program as a public assistance program in general can be taken as a measure of the steady disintegration of the Negro family structure over the past generations in the United States. Chapter 3, The Roots of the Problem. The most perplexing question about American slavery, which has never been altogether explained, and which indeed most Americans hardly know exist, has been stated by Nathan Glazer as follows. Why was American slavery the most awful the world has ever known? The only thing that can be said with certainty is that this is true. It was. American slavery was profoundly different from and in its lasting effects on individuals and their children, indescribably worse than any recorded servitude, ancient or modern. The peculiar nature of the American slavery was noted by Alex de Tocqueville and others, but it was not until 1948 that Frank Tannenbaum of South American specialists pointed to the striking differences between Brazilian and American slavery. Feudal Catholic society of Brazil had a legal and religious tradition which accorded the slave a place as a human being in the hierarchy of society. A luckless, miserable place to be sure, but a place withal. In contrast, there was nothing in the traditional English law or Protestant theology which could accommodate to the fact of human bondage. The slaves were therefore reduced to the status of chattel, often, no doubt, well cared for. No, they weren't. Even privileged chattels, but chattels nonetheless. See, that's that way of making themselves feel better about what it was. You know, treating a human like an animal is incomprehensible. It's just, you know, it can't be rationalized, and it can't be made to sound better or look better. Okay. Glazer also focused on Brazil's United States comparison continues. In Brazil, the slaves had many more rights than the United States. He could legally marry. He could indeed had to be baptized. Okay, he had to be baptized and become a member of the Catholic Church. His family could not be broken up for sale, and he had many days on which he could either rest or earn money to buy his freedom. Excuse me. Okay, buy his freedom. Okay, the government encouraged manumission, and the freedom of infants could often be purchased for a small sum at the baptismal font. In short, the Brazilian slave knew he was a man and that he differed in degree, not in kind, from his master. In the United States, the slave was totally removed from the protection of the organized society. Compare the elaborate provisions for the protection of the slaves in the Bible. His existence as a human being was given no recognition by any religious or secular agency. He was totally ignorant of and completely cut off from his past, and he was offered absolutely no hope for the future. His children could be sold. His marriage was not recognized. His wife could be violated or sold. There was something comic about calling the woman with whom the master permitted him to live a wife. That's profound. That's profound, gentlemen, ladies. That's profound. You know, what he's essentially saying there is that black women were never really our wives. You know, BGS has said this too, that black women were not our wives. And this is also substantiated in several books. You know, black women were brought over here as entertainment for white men, and later for breeding. But a lot of that breeding was with white men, and some with black slaves who might not have been their husbands. You know, some of them might have made their own children in addition to. But to say that we had wives back then is a stretch. You know, so then to be released from slavery, and then, you know, to be released out into society and try to make your way, what you're doing is you're emulating life that you observed up on the porch. So you watched the white people up on the porch, and that was life to you. That was marriage to you. Whatever you saw in his house, that was what it was to you. That's why there's so much conflict today about what marriage is, what our lives together should be. It's because we're still emulating master. And that's why so many people are so you know, you see what this report is saying, and it's not saying anything that the books haven't been saying all along. And that is, you know, your religious beliefs, everything about who you are in this society was given to you. And you're trying to make the best of it, even when it doesn't work for you. So, you know, remember that. Okay. And he could also be subject without redress to frightful barbarities. There was presumably as many sadists among slave owner men and women as there are in other groups. The slave could not by law be taught to read or write. He could not practice any religion without the permission of his master. He could never meet with his fellows for religious or any other purposes. That's why I still look at you when you're in groups. They never like us in groups. You know, that's why we could never have done some of the things that have just recently happened here in the nation, because you catch yourself in a big group and see what happened. Gonna get busted up. Anywhere you look, anywhere in the nation, anywhere where there's a big group of us, it's trouble. You know I'm telling the truth. Okay. So, say this among slave owners, women. Okay, the slave could not. Okay, by law we read to write. Okay, religion without permission from his master, and could never meet his fellows for religious or other purposes, except in the presence of whites. So you had to be monitored if you met in groups. And finally, if a master wished to free him, every legal obstacle was used to thwart such action. Okay. Good book, American Slave Coast. If you haven't read it, read it. The Half That's Never Been Told. If you haven't read it, read it. They Were Her Property. If you haven't read it, go read it. Those books should be required reading for you to know what you had to deal with. Historical precedent is important beyond measure. We have to read, ladies and gentlemen, we have to read and understand why we believe what we believe, you know, why what we were given in schools is not working for us, why it's tearing our families apart, why we don't get along with each other. All those things are important. Okay. Ooh. Okay, this was not what slavery meant in the ancient world in medieval or early modern Europe. in Brazil and the West Indies. More important, American slavery was also awful in its effects. If we compared the present situation of the American Negro with that of, let us say, Brazilian Negroes who were slaves 20 years longer, we begin to suspect that the differences are the results of very different patterns of slavery. Today, the Brazilian Negroes are Brazilians. Though most are poor and do the hard and dirty work of the country, as Negroes do in the United States, they are not cut off from society. They reach into its highest strata, merging there. In smaller and smaller numbers, it is true, but with complete acceptance with other Brazilians of all kinds. The relations between Negroes and whites in Brazil show nothing of mass irrationality that prevails in this country. I would beg to differ with that, but hey, that's a whole nother subject. Stanley M. Elkins, drawing on the aberrant behavior of prisoners in Nazi concentration camps, drew an elaborate parallel between the two institutions. This thesis has been summarized as follows by Tom Pettigrew. Both were closed systems with little chance of manumission. And manumission is freedom for any of you guys who don't know what manumission is. The emphasis on survival and a single omnipresent authority. The profound personality change created by Nazi internment, as independently reported by a number of psychologists and psychiatrists who survived, was toward childishness and total acceptance of the SS guards as father figures, a syndrome strikingly similar to the Sambo caricature of the Southern slave. 9th century racists readily believed that the Sambo personality was simply an inborn racial type, yet no African anthropological data has ever shown any personality type resembling Sambo. And the concentration camps modeled the equivalent personality pattern in a wide variety of Caucasian prisoners. Nor was Sambo merely a product of slavery in the abstract. For the less devastating Latin American system, there developed such a type exceeding this line of reasoning. Psychologists point out that slavery in all its forms sharply lowered the need for achievement in slaves. Negroes in bondage, stripped of their African heritage, were placed in a completely dependent role. All of their rewards came from individual initiative and enterprise, but from absolute obedience. Not from individual initiative and enterprise, but from absolute obedience. A situation that severely depresses the need for achievement among all peoples. Most important of all, slavery vivated family life. Since many slave owners neither fostered Christian marriage among their slave couples nor hesitated to separate them on the auction block, the slave household often developed a fatherless matrifocal, mother-centered pattern. Matrifocal. Yeah. That's what's up. Okay. The Reconstruction. Sorry. Glasses. With the emancipation of the slaves, the Negro American family began to forming the United States on a widespread scale, but it did so in an atmosphere markedly different from that which has produced the white American family. The Negro was given liberty, but not equality. Life remained hazardous and marginal. Of the greatest importance, the Negro male, particularly in the South, became an object of intense hostility and attitude unquestionably based in some measures of fear. When Jim Crow made its appearance toward the end of the 19th century, it may be speculated that it was the Negro male who was most humiliated thereby. The male was more likely to use public facilities, which rapidly became segregated once the process began, and just as important, segregation and submissiveness exacts is surely more destructive to the male than to the female personality. Keeping the Negro in his place can be translated as keeping the Negro male in his place. The female was not a threat to anyone. And I'm sure you guys are going to want this, but these are the key points here. You know, you always hear, women saying that basically, black women had it so bad and they were treated so bad by their, by their husbands and all this other kind of stuff. But you see who was catching it. Even the white people know who were catching it. I mean, it's documented who were catching it. You look at the number of males lynched as opposed to the numbers of females that were lynched. You look where the women worked in their houses, and you look where the men worked. They did menial labor. They did the hardest back-breaking work. The work that kills them faster, that makes them tired, not able to raise their kids, not able to do anything but go work, come home, eat, and go work. And I think that's probably came from fixing your man's plate, because he's going out there giving 110%. And when he comes home, fixing a plate, although it seems like a small thing, it's a big thing, especially when you don't have nothing else left to give, So, unquestionably, these events worked against the emergence of a strong father figure. The very essence of the male animal, from the bantam rooster to the 4-star general, is to strut. Indeed, in 9th century America, a particular type of exaggerated male boastfulness became almost a national style. Not for the Negro male, the sassy nigger sick was lynched. That's true. So you couldn't speak up for yourself. You couldn't have, the gravitas of a man, because it was beat out of you. It was killed out of you, worked out of you. The only place you could be a man was with your woman. If you were, you had enough energy to do anything around her. But there's no empathy for that. Every time you see something that hits the big screen that's popular, i.e. the color purple, we're made to look like the worst thing possible. You gotta, keep your head open. Keep thinking about these processes. Why are we being depicted this way? Why are our women depicting us in this way? Why are they looking at us like we are a threat? That we need to be, someone that they need to be over. Why is it that they don't want us to be have any type of educational achievement, openings in jobs after we endured all of this? Why is it that there's no empathy to where, black women are saying, yes, black men, it's about time that they deserve something. And if our position is to take care of women, then guess what? You're going to benefit from that. If I get a good job, then guess what? I'm going to have that money to take you out on a date. But the other aspect to that is you're going to have to be genuine. You can't sit up and try to use me for my money and just basically go, do all of these big things, spending up all my money while you making your money. And, it's just exploitation. It's usury. That's what it is. And that's what we've replaced, a better relationship situation in the past with what we're dealing with now. That's why black men are so angry. you know, and some may say that we didn't go through this stuff, but you know what? Our grandfathers and fathers up to this point, you know somebody who was in slavery. This is people that's still alive. You know somebody who was around when you know, Tuskegee happened, when, you know, Black Wall Street happened. You know somebody who lived through that. And those people raised your father, you know, helped raise you, your mother. So you're getting a piece of that. But unlike, you know, folks of my generation, where we respected that and we are humbled by that experience, you have people who are coming up now that have no connection to that and don't want to hear anything about it. You know, when I hear people sit up and say they don't want to hear anything about slavery or any of that other stuff, you know, because that has nothing to do with that. I don't want to see another slave movie, you know? It's because you're running from your history, you know? You have a duty to remember that and to pass on the lessons and the strength of our ancestors. You know, you don't hear Jewish people saying that they gonna forget. You don't hear anybody saying they gonna forget. Hell, Palestinians ain't forgetting nothing. You don't hear nobody saying that they've been wrong to forget, except for they want us, Black Americans, to forget. You know, this man in this report basically made a case for us to get reparations. But you know what? Over this last year, during this last election, you had Black folks coming out saying that that Black folks don't need no reparations. You had Africans coming out saying that Black folks don't need no reparations. That's crazy. They're not even ADOS, but they're thwarting the process by which we could get some semblance of redress for being worked for nothing and being killed for nothing, not being and having our wives subjugated or taken, or, you know, whatever the case may have been during that time. Not to mention the stuff that we still go through today. You still have obstacles that you have to get through when you're going to college. It's no guarantee. Yeah, they'll take your money, but they ain't guaranteeing you're going to get out of there. No matter what you do, whether you do the work or not. That's not talked about as much either. But let me move on, man, because this is a lot of information. Okay. All right, where did I stop? Okay. In this situation, the Negro family made but little progress toward the middle class pattern of the present time. Margaret Mead has pointed out that while in every known human society everywhere in the world, the young male learns that when he grows up, one of the things which he must do in order to be a full member of society is to provide food for some female and her young. This pattern is not immutable, however. It can be broken, even though it has always eventually reasserted itself. Within the family, each new generation of young males learn appropriate nurturing behavior and superimpose upon their biological given maleness this learned parental role. When the family breaks down, as it does under slavery, under certain forms of unindentured labor and serfdom, in periods of extreme social unrest during wars, revolutions, famines, and epidemics, or in periods of abrupt transition from one type of economy to another, this delicate line of transmission is broken. Men may founder badly in these periods, during which the primary unit may again become mother and child. The biologically given and special conditions under which a man has held his social traditions in trust are violated and distorted. E. Franklin Frazier makes clear, at the time of emancipation, Negro women were already accustomed to playing the dominant role in family and marriage relations, and that this role persisted in the decades of rural life that followed. Okay? Now, when these women tell you that They were, all these misters were out here and they would just, running around with their feet in their backs and, just oppressing these women. You remember this. There is no data to suggest that this occurred. I'm going to read this again. E. Franklin Frazier, who studied this in the 50s, makes it clear that at the time of emancipation, Negro women were already accustomed to playing the dominant role in the family and marriage relations. So women ran the house, ran those men. And you can trust that if a man really was trying to be, like a lot of men say today, a dominant figure, that if that woman wasn't going, then he was going to run clean on out that house. And he says that role was persistent in the decades of rural life that followed. That's after the 50s now. And it's still going on to this day. The majority of these people that you see out here don't want to have to listen to anything that a man has to say. They don't want to have to be respectful to a man at all. A man has to measure up to what they think a man should be. Even though they haven't spent one day, 1 hour being a man ever in any stretch of anyone's imagination or real life. Okay, going on to the urbanization. Okay, country life in the city and the city life are profoundly different. The gradual shift of American society from rural to an urban basis over the past century and half has caused abundant strains, many of which are still much in evidence. Which this shift occurs suddenly, drastically, in 1 or 2 generations. The effects is immensely disruptive and traditional social patterns. It was this abrupt transition that produced the wild Irish slums of the 19th century in the Northeast. Okay, drunkenness, crime, corruption, discrimination, family disorganization, juvenile delinquency were the routine of the era. In our own time, the same sudden transition has produced the Negro slum. Different forms, but hardly better than its predecessors, fundamentally the result of the same processes. Negroes are now more urbanized than whites. And you know what happened? I'm sure everybody's got a family member that's from the South, but their families ran to California or to Chicago or to New York, trying to make their fortunes, find a better way of life. Country is an ear of corn, but they're going up to the big city trying to find their way. I mean, it's still happening to this day. So, still happening. Okay. Negro families in the cities are more frequently headed by a woman than those in the country. And that's because those women are trying to run from traditional family life. They're trying to do things differently. They're trying to make more money. And you find that in these cities that these people tend to believe, like you see in Kevin Samuels, they believe men make a lot more money than what they make, and they see them as that resource for them to go and harvest when they want to go get something to eat. They want to go and serial date and all of that kind of stuff, And you have a lot more of them out here than you have good girls who are trying to do things the traditional way. So it appears as if they don't exist because the loudest ones are basically fogging up the room. You can't see the good girls. Okay. Negro families in the cities are more frequently headed by women than those in the country. The difference between white and Negro proportions of families headed by a woman is greater in the city than in the country. The promise of the city has so far been denied the majority of Negro migrants, and most particularly the Negro family. In 1939, E. Franklin Frazier described its plight movingly in the part of the Negro family entitled "In the City of Destruction." So this stuff has been going on since 1939. Since 1939 up to now, we're still seeing the same things. This reminds me of the movie
on the edge of tomorrow. How many more resets are we going to do? Each generation, we see the same stuff going on. We still see the same dysfunction, the same stuff. How many more resets are we going to get? Yeah. That's what I think sometimes. Okay. The impact of hundreds of thousands of rural Southern Negroes upon northern metropolitan communities presents a bewildering spectacle, striking contrast in levels of civilization, economic well-being among those newcomers to modern civilization seem to baffle any attempt to discover order and direction in their mode of life. In many cases, of course, the dissolution of the simple family organization has begun before the family reaches the northern city. Poverty, ignorance, and color force them to seek homes in deteriorated slum areas, which practically all institutional life has disappeared. Hence, at the same time that these simple rural families are losing their internal cohesion, they are being freed from the controlling forces of public opinion and communal institutions, which makes it easier for them to get wild. Okay. Family desertion among Negroes in the city appears then to be one of the inevitable consequences of the impact of urban life on simple family organization and folk culture, which the Negro has evolved in the rural South. The distribution and desertion in relation to the general economic and cultural organizations of Negro communities that have grown up in the American cities shows in a striking manner the influence of selective factors in the process of adjustment to the urban environment. Okay, Fraser concluded his classic study, The Negro Family, with the prophecy that the travail of civilization is not yet ended. First, it appears that the family which evolved within the isolated world of the Negro folk will become increasingly disorganized. Modern means communication will break down. Ooh, I'm sure Kevin can appreciate that. Modern women, he's been throwing that out there. And like I said, modern means the communication will break down, the isolation of the world of the Black folk. As long as the bankrupt system of the Southern agriculture exists, Negro families will continue to seek a living in towns and cities of the country. They will crowd the slum areas of the southern cities or make their way to northern cities where their family life will become disrupted and their poverty will force them to depend upon charity. In every index of the family pathology, divorce, separation, desertion, female family head, children in broken homes, illegitimacy, the contrast between the urban and rural environment for Negro families is unmistakable. Harlem, into which Negroes began to move early in this century, is the center and symbol of urban life of the Negro family. Conditions in Harlem are not worse. They are probably better than in most Negro ghettos. The social disorganization of Central Harlem, comprising 10 health areas, as thoroughly documented by Harry Report, saves the illegitimacy rates. These have now been made available through the Labor Department by the New York City Department of Health. There could hardly be a more dramatic demonstration of the crumbling and breakdown of the family structure on the urban frontier, unemployment and poverty. The impact of unemployment on the Negro family, and particularly on the Negro male, is the least understood of all the developments that have contributed to the present crisis. There is little analysis because there has been almost no inquiry. Unemployment for whites and non-whites alike has on the whole been treated as an economic phenomenon, with almost no attention paid for at least a quarter century on social and personal consequences. In 1940, Edward White Blake described the effects of unemployment on the family structure in terms of 6 stages of adjustment. Although the family studied were white, the pattern would clearly seem to be a general one, and apply to Negro families as well. The first 2 stages end with the exhaustion of credit and the entry of the wife into the labor force. The father is no longer the provider, and the elder children become resentful. Okay. The third stage is the critical one. The commencing critical one of commencing a new day existence. At this point, 2 women are in charge. Consider the fact that relief investigators or caseworkers are normally women and deal with the housewife, already suffering a loss in prestige and authority in the family because of his failure to be the chief breadwinner. The male head of the family feels deeply this obvious transfer of planning for the family well-being to 2 women. One of them, an outsider, his role is reduced to that of errand boy to and from the relief office. If the family makes it through this stage, Bake finds that it is likely to survive, and the rest of the process is one of adjustment. The critical element of the adjustment was not welfare payments, but work. Having observed our families under conditions of unemployment with no public help, or with that help coming from direct and from work relief, we are convinced that after the exhaustion of self-produced resources, work relief is the only type of assistance which can restore the strained bond of the family relationship, in which promises of continued functioning of that family in meeting the responsibilities imposed upon it by our culture. Work is precisely the one thing the Negro family head in such circumstances has not received over the past generation. The fundamental overwhelming fact is that Negro unemployment, with the exception of the few years during World War II and the Korean War, has continued at disaster levels for 35 years. Once again, this is particularly the case in the northern urban areas to which the Negro population has been moving. The 1930 census taken in the spring, before the Depression was in full swing, showed Negro unemployment at 6.1%, as against 6.6% for whites. But taking out the South reversed the relationship. Whites 7.4% and non-white was 11.5%. By 1940, the 2-to-1 white Negro unemployment relationship that persists to this day had clearly emerged. Taking out the South, again, whites were 14.8% and non-whites were 29.7%. Since 1929, the Negro worker has been tremendously affected by the movements of the business cycle of employment. He has been hit worse by declines than whites and proportionally helped more by recoveries. In 1951 to 1963, the levels of the Negro male unemployment was on a long run rising trend. While at the same time following the short run-ups and down of the business cycle during the same period, the number of broken families in the Negro world was also on a long run rise. The intermediate ups and downs, a glance at the chart on page 22 reveals that the series moves in the same direction, up and down together, with long run rising trend, but that the peaks and troughs are 1 year out of phase. The unemployment peaks 1 year before the broken families, and so on. By plotting this series in terms of deviation from trends, the movement, moving unemployment curve 1 year ahead, we see the clear relation to otherwise seemingly unrelated series of events. The cyclic swings in unemployment have their counterpart in increase and decrease in separations. Okay. The effect of recession, unemployment on divorces further illustrates the economic root of the problem. The non-white divorce rates dipped slightly in high unemployment years like 1954 to 1955, 1958, and 1961 to 1962. It says, see a table that's not produced. Okay, divorce is expensive. Those without money resort to separation or desertion. While divorce is not a desirable goal for a society, it recognizes the importance of marriage and family. And for children, some family continuity and support is more likely when institutions of the family has been recognized. The conclusion from these and similar data is difficult to avoid. During times when jobs were reasonably plentiful, although at no time during this period, save perhaps the first 2 years, did the unemployment rate for Negro males drop to anything like a reasonable level. The Negro family became stronger and more stable as jobs became more and more difficult to find. The stability of the family became more and more difficult to maintain. Okay. This relation is clearly seen in terms of the illegitimacy rates of census tracts, the District of Columbia compared with male unemployment rates in the same neighborhoods. In 1963, the prosperous year, 29.2% of all Negro men in the labor force were unemployed at some time during the year. Almost half of these men were out of work 15 weeks or more. The impact of poverty on Negro family structure is no less obvious, although, again, it may not be widely acknowledged. There would seem to be an American tradition, agrarian in its origins, but reinforced by attitudes of urban immigrant groups, to the effect that family mortality and stability decline as income and social position rise. Over the years, this may have provided some consolation to the poor, but there is little evidence that it is true. On the contrary, higher family incomes are unmistakably associated with greater family stability. Which comes first may be a matter of conjecture, but the conjunction of the two characteristics is unmistakable. The Negro family is no exception. In the District of Columbia, for example, census tracts with the median incomes over $8,000 had an illegitimacy rate 1/3 of the tracts in the category of 4,000. Look at those numbers then and now, y'all. Okay, the wage system. The American wage system is conspicuous in the degree to which it provides high incomes for individuals, but it's rarely adjusted to ensure that families as well as individuals' needs are met. Almost without exception, the social welfare and social insurance systems of other industrial democracies provide for some adjustment or supplement of a worker's income, provide for the extra expenses of those with families. American arrangements do not save for income tax deductions. Unemployment rate of non-white men compared with the percent of non-white women separated from their husbands. Okay. There's that. And they start counting that unemployment at 14. Look at that. Okay. All right. And here's the unemployment rate of non-white males aged 14 and over versus percent of non-white married women separated from their husbands. And there you see you see Moynihan scissors right there. Still. Unemployment rates dropping. Non-white separated women. You see that's where they branch off. And you can see the trends, that he was talking about in between the years. Okay. All right. The federal minimum wage of $1.25 per hour provides a basic income for an individual, but an income well below the poverty line for a couple, much less a family with children. 1965 Economic Report of the President revised the data on the number of persons living in poverty in the United States to take account for varying needs of families in different sizes. Rather than using a flat cutoff at the $3,000 income level, the resulting revision illustrated the significance of family size. Using these criteria, the number of poor families is smaller, but the number of large families who are poor increases. The number of children in poverty rises by more than 1/3, from 11 million to 15 million. This means that 1/4 of the nation's children living in families. Wow, we're living in families that are poor. 1/3 of these children belong to families in which the father was not only present, but was employed the year around. In overall terms, median family income is lower for large families than for small families. Families of 6 or more children have a median income of 24% below families with 3. It may be added that 47% of young men who fail the selective service education test come from families of 6 or more children. Not enough resources for the number of kids. Okay, during the 1950s and 1960 decade, heavy Negro migration to the cities of the North and the West, the ratio of non-white to white family incomes in cities increased from 57 to 63%. Corresponding declines in the ratio in the rural, non-farm, and farm areas kept the national ratio virtually unchanged. But between 1960 and 1963, the median non-white family income slipped from 55% to 53% of white income. The drop occurred in 3 regions, with only the South, where the large proportion of Negro families have more than one earner, showing a slight improvement. Okay, and y'all remember that those multiple earners, they weren't out there because they wanted to be out there. They were out there because they made them get out there in the South. They forced Black women to get out there and work. They didn't get out there because they wanted to have some extra income for the house. No, they forced them so the white women could go out and have time to go do what they wanted to do. They kept the kids and kept the house up and all of that. That's why, historical precedent is important. Get out the TV and get in the book. All right. Because in general terms, Negro families have the largest number of children and the lowest incomes. Many Negro fathers literally cannot support their families because the father is either not present, is unemployed, or makes such a low wage the Negro woman goes to work. 56% of Negro women aged 25 to 64 are in the workforce against 42% of white women. The dependence on the mother's income undermines the position of the father and deprives the children of the kinds of attention, particularly in school matters, which is now a standard feature of the middle class upbringing. Okay. So as you see, all of this stuff, this move towards having women go out and work more than they were able to take care of their families was detrimental to the families. And that's what they're talking about here. Okay, the dimensions grow. The dimensions of the problems of the Negro Americans are compounded by the present extraordinary growth in Negro population. At the founding of the nation and into the first decade of the 19th century, 1 American in 5 was a Negro. The proportion declined steadily until it was only 1 in 10 in the 1920s, where it held until the 1950s when it began to rise. Since the 1950s, the Negro population has grown at a rate of 2.4% per year, compared to 1.7% for the total population. If this rate continues in 7 years, 1 American in 8 will be non-white. Okay. These changes are the result of the declining Negro death rate, now approaching that of the nation generally, and the fertility rate that grew steadily during the post-war period. In 1959, the ratio of white to non-white fertility rates reached 1 to 1.42. Both the white and non-white fertility rates have declined since 1959, but the differential has not narrowed. Family size increased among non-white families between 1950 and 1960, as much as those without fathers as for those with fathers. Average family size changed little among white families, with a slight increase in the size of husband-wife families balanced by the decline in the size of the families without fathers. Negro women not only have more children, but have them earlier. Thus, in 1960s, there were 1,247 children ever born per 1,000 ever married. Non-white women 15 to 19 years of age, y'all see that number? 15 to 19 years of age. It makes y'all uncomfortable nowadays. As against only 725 among white women, a ratio of 1 to 7 to 1. The Negro fertility rate overall is now 1.4 times the white, but what might be called the generation rate is 1.7 times the white. Okay, this population growth must inevitably lead to an unconcealable crisis in the Negro unemployment. The most conspicuous failure in the American social system in the past 10 years has been inadequacy in providing jobs for the Negro youth. Thus, in January 1965, the unemployment rate for Negro teenagers stood at 29%. This problem will now become steadily more serious. During the rest of the 1960s, the non-white civilian population, 14 years of age and over, will increase by 20%, more than double the white rate. The non-white labor force will correspondingly increase 20% in the next 6 years, double the rate of increase in non-white labor force of the past decade. As with the population as a whole, there is much evidence that children are being born most rapidly in those Negro families with the least financial resources. This is an ancient pattern, but because the needs of the children are greater today, it is very possible that the education and opportunity gap between the offspring of these families and those of stable middle-class unions is not closing, but is growing wider. A cycle is at work. Too many children too early make it most difficult for the parents to finish school. In February 1963, 38% of white girls who dropped out of school did so because of marriage or pregnancy. as against 49% of non-white girls. Ooh. As Urban League, a study in New York, reported that 44% of girls dropouts left school because of pregnancy. Low education levels, in turn, produce low income levels, which deprive children of many opportunities, and so the cycle repeats itself. Okay, an exception is the rather small impact of the ADCU program since 1961, now expanded by Title V of the Economic Opportunity Act. Okay, Chapter 4, the Tangle Pathology. That the Negro American has survived at all is extraordinary. A lesser people might simply have died out, as indeed others have. That the Negro community has not only survived, but in this political generation has entered national affairs as a moderate, humane, and constructive national force is the highest testament to the healing powers of the democratic ideal and the creative vitality of the Negro people. But it may not be supposed that the Negro community has not paid a fearful price for the incredible mistreatment to which it has been subjected over the past 3 centuries. In essence, the Negro community has been forced into a matriarchal structure, which, because it is too out of line with the rest of American society, seriously retards the progress of the group as a whole and imposes a crushing burden on the Negro male, in consequence on a great many Negro women as well. There is presumably no special reason why a society in which males are dominant in family relationships is to be preferred to a matriarchal arrangement. However, it is clearly a disadvantage for a minority group to be operating on one principle while the great majority of the population and one with the most advantages to begin with is operating on another. This is the present situation of the Negro. Ours is a society which presumes male leadership in private and public affairs. The arrangement of society facilitate such leadership and reward it. A subculture such as that of the Negro American, in which this is not the pattern, is placed at a distinct disadvantage. So this part right here just negated the entire color purple narrative, because women ran the house, ran the housing situations. The men were not in a dominant position in the houses or in the relationships. This came from Black researchers. You think they lied? But you got people out here getting rich, convincing Black women that they have been, mistreated the way white women were mistreated, and the way they characterized their mistreatment by the feminist movement. Okay. Here, an earlier word of caution should be repeated. These is much evidence that a considerable number of Negro families have managed to break out of the tangle of pathology and to establish themselves as stable, effective units living according to patterns of American society in general. E. Franklin Frazier has suggested that the middle-class Negro American family is, if anything, more patriarchal and protective of its children than the general run of such families. Given equal opportunities, the children of these families will perform as well or better than their white peers. They need no help from anyone and ask none. While this phenomenon is not easily measured. One index is the middle class. Negroes have even fewer children than middle class whites, indicating a desire to conserve the advantages they have made and to ensure that their children do as well or better. Negro women who marry early to uneducated laborers have more children than white women in the same situation. Negro women who marry at the common age for the middle class to get to educated men doing technical or professional work have only 4/5 as many children as their white counterparts. It might be estimated that as much as half of the Negro community falls into the middle class. However, the remaining half is in desperate and deteriorating circumstances. Moreover, because of housing segregation, it is immensely difficult for the stable half to escape from the cultural influences of the unstable one. The children of the middle class Negroes often as not must grow up in or next to the slums, an experience almost unknown to white middle class children. They are therefore constantly exposed to the pathology of the disturbed group and constantly in danger of being drawn into it. It is for this reason that the propositions put forth in this study may be thought of as having a more or less general application. In a word, most Negro youth are in danger of being caught up in the tangle of pathology that affects their world, and probably a majority are so entrapped, many of those who escaped do so for one generation only. As things are now are, their children may have to run the gauntlet all over again. That is not the least vicious aspect of the world that white America has made for the Negro. Obviously, not every instance of social pathology afflicting the Negro community can be traced to the weakness of the family structure. If, for example, organized crime in the Negro community were not largely controlled by whites, where would more capital accumulation among Negroes, and therefore probably more Negro business enterprises? If it were not for the hostility and the fear many whites exhibit towards Negroes, they in turn would be less afflicted by hostility and fear and so on. There is no one Negro community. There is no one Negro problem. There is no one solution. Nonetheless, at the center of the tangle of pathology is the weakness of the family structure. Once or twice removed, it will be found to be principal source of most of the aberrant, inadequate, and antisocial behavior that did not establish but now serves to perpetuate the cycle of poverty and deprivation. Okay. It was by destroying the Negro family under slavery that white America broke the will of the Negro people. Although the will has reasserted itself in our time, it is a resurgence doomed to frustration unless the viability of the Negro family is restored. The matriarchy. Okay. Fundamental fact of the Negro American family life is often reverse roles of the husband and the wife. Robert O. Blood Jr., Donald M. Wolfe, in a study of Detroit families, note that the Negro husbands have unusually low power. And while this is characteristic of all low-income families, the pattern pervades the Negro social structure. The cumulative result of the discrimination in jobs and segregated housing and the poor schooling of Negro men in 44% of Negro families studied, the wife was dominant, as against 20% of white wives, whereas the majority of white families are equalitarian. The largest percentage of Negro families are dominant by the wife. The matriarchal pattern of so many Negro families reinforces itself over the generations. This process begins with education. Although the gap appears to be closing at the moment, for a long while, Negro females were better educated than Negro males, and this remains true today. Remains true today too. For the Negro population as a whole, the difference in education attainment between non-white men and women in the labor force is even greater. Men lag at 1.1 years behind women. The disparity in educational attainment for men and female youth 16 to 21 were out of school in February 1963 is striking. Among the non-white males, 66.3% were not high school graduates, compared with 55.0% of females. A similar difference existed at the college level, with 4.5% of males having completed 1 to 3 years of college, compared to 7.3% of females. Okay. The poor performance of the male in school exists from the very beginning. And the magnitude of the difference between was documented in 1960 census in statistics on the number of children who have fallen 1 or more grades below the typical grade for children of the same age. The boys have more frequently fallen behind at every age level. White boys also lag behind white girls, but at a differential of 1 to 6 percentage points. In 1960, 39% of all white persons and 25 years of age and over who had completed 4 or more years of college were women. 53% of non-whites who had attained this level were women. However, the gap is closing. By October 1963, there were slightly more Negro men in college than women. Among whites, there were almost twice as many men as women were enrolled. Okay. There is much evidence that Negro females are better students than their male counterparts. Daniel Thomas of Dillard University in Private Communication on January 9th, 1965 writes, as low as is the aspirational level among lower class Negro girls, it is considerably higher than among the boys. For example, I have examined the honor rolls in Negro high schools for about 10 years. As a rule, for 75 to 90% of all Negro honor students are girls. Dr. Thomas reports that 70% of all applications to National Achievement Scholarship programs financed by the Ford Foundation for Outstanding Negro High School graduates are girls, despite special efforts by high school principals to submit the names of boys. The finalists for the new program for outstanding Negro students were recently announced. Based on an inspection of the names, only about 43% of all of the 639 finalists were male. However, in the regular National Merit Scholarship Program, males received 67% of the 67% of the 1964 scholarship awards. Sorry, y'all, it's kind of getting late. Inevitably, these disparities have carried over to the area of employment and income. In 1 out of 4 Negro families where the husband is present and is an earner, and someone else in the family works, the husband is not the principal earner. The comparable figure for whites is 18%. More important, it is clear that Negro females have established a strong position for themselves in white collar and professional employment, precisely the areas of the economy which are growing most rapidly and to which the highest percentage is accorded. The President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity, making a preliminary report on employment in 1964 of over 16,000 companies, which nearly 5 million employees, revealed this pattern with dramatic emphasis. In this workforce, Negro males outnumber Negro females by a ratio of 4 to 1, yet Negro males represent only 1.2% of all males in white-collar occupations, while Negro females represent 3.1% of the total female white-collar workforce. Negro males represent 1.1% of all professionals, whereas Negro females represent roughly 6% of all female professions. Again, in technical occupations, Negro males represent 2.1% of all male technicians, while Negro females represent only 10% of female technicians. It would appear, therefore, that there are proportionally 4 times as many Negro females in significant white-collar jobs than Negro males. The same thing's happening today, but yet all of the women still want somebody that makes over 100,000. Unrealistic. Educated, but unrealistic. Doesn't make sense, does it? Although it is evident that office and clerical jobs account for approximately 50% of all Negro female white-collar workers, it is significant that 6 out of every 100 Negro females are in professional jobs. This is significantly similar to the rate of all females in such jobs. Approximately 7 out of every 100 Negro females are in technician jobs. This exceeds the proportion of all females in technician jobs, approximately 5 out of every 100. Negro families in skilled jobs are almost the same as that of all females in such jobs. 9 out of every 100 Negro males are in skilled occupations, while 21 out of 100 of all males are in such jobs. This pattern is to be seen in the federal government, where special efforts have been made recently to ensure equal employment opportunity for Negroes. These efforts have been notably successful in departments such as labor, whereas some 19% of employees are now Negro. A not disproportionate percentage given to the composition of the workforce in the areas where the main department offices are located. However, it may well be that these efforts have redounded mostly to the benefit of Negro women. And many even have accentuated the comparative disadvantage of Negro men. 7% of Negro employees of the Department of Labor are women, as contrasted with only 42% of white employees. Among non-professional labor department employees, where the most employment opportunities exist for all groups, Negro women outnumbered Negro men 4 to 1. An average almost 1 grade higher in classification. The testimony to the effects of the patterns in Negro family structure is widespread and hardly to be doubted. Okay, so taking all those statistics into consideration, how can you justify not putting forth money to help black men and boys when black women were pretty much in the workforce at a comparable rate to white women in these white collar jobs? Education higher than black men, in white collar jobs at a higher rate than white men, graduating from college, higher rate than white men, than black men. Every category, they're higher than black men. But all of the money since 1965 and all of the programs have gone towards helping white women and black women. But the recommendation was to help black men and black boys so that they could raise functional families and children and have prosperous families. But still, how many more redos are we going to get? How many more generations are going to have to go by before we finally start investing in black men and boys, so that we get the education, you get the training, you get the job, so that you can take care of your kids, so that you can be in these families. And, at what point are women going to look at the history of how they've been and see that, you guys were running things. You guys have always been running things. You've been running things with your attitudes and with, with your earning potential, everything. You've always run, men who basically didn't have the power to put you in a submissive role, no matter what we did. And you're still doing it to this day with all of this shaming and insulting and guilt tripping of men. It's ridiculous. But let's move on. Let's finish this up. Whitney Young, historically in the matriarchal Negro society, mothers made sure that if one of their children had a chance of higher education, the daughter, sorry about that, that's my dog, y'all, higher education, the daughter was the one to pursue it. The effects on family functioning, the role performance of this historical experience, economic deprivation, is what you might predict. Both as the husband and as a father, the Negro male is made to feel inadequate, not because he is unlovable or unaffectionate, lacks intelligence, or even a gray flannel suit, but in a society that measures a man by the size of his paycheck, he doesn't stand very tall in comparison with his white counterparts. To this situation, he may react with withdrawal, bitterness towards society, aggression, both within the family and racial group, self-hatred, or crime. Or he may escape through a number of avenues that help him to lose himself in fantasy or to compensate for his low status through a variety of exploits. Thomas Pettigrew. The Negro wife in this situation can easily become disgusted with her financially dependent husband, and her rejection of him further alienates the male from family life. Embittered by their experiences with men, many Negro mothers often act to perpetuate the mother-centered pattern by taking a greater interest in their daughters than their sons. Deaton Brooks. In a matriarchal structure, the women are transmitting the culture. Okay. So they're teaching these boys, they're teaching them how to react towards women in society. So when you say that you don't like these weak men and these men aren't strong enough and all of that, it's because that's what you're raising. That's what's being raised out here. When you talk loud and belittle men, that's what you're raising. That's what you're perpetuating into the next group of women. And the same thing happened to the men that you're dealing with. Their mothers, their aunts, the women that were in their families, they did the same thing to them. Okay, Dorothy Height. If the Negro woman has major underlying concern, it is the status of the Negro man and his position in the community, and his need for feeling himself an important person, free and able to make his contribution in the whole society in order that he may strengthen his home. Duncan M. McEntry. The Negro illegitimacy rate always has been high, about 8 times the white rate in 1940, and somewhat higher today, even though the white illegitimacy rate also is climbing. The Negro statistics are somatic of some old socioeconomic problems, not the least of which are underemployment among Negro men and compensating higher labor force propensity among Negro women. Both operate to enlarge the mother's role, undercutting the status of the male and making many Negro families essentially matriarchal. The Negro man's uncertain unemployment prospects, matriarchy, and high cost of divorce combine to encourage desertion. The poor man's divorce increase the number of couples not married and thereby also increases the Negro illegitimacy rate. In the meantime, higher Negro birth rates are increasing the non-white population, while migration into cities like Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. is making the public assistance roles in such cities heavily, even predominantly, Negro. Robin M. Williams, Jr., study of Elmira, New York. Only 57% of Negro adults reported themselves as married spouse present, as compared to 78% of native white American Gentiles, 91% of Italian Americans, and 96% of Jewish informants. Of the 93% of unmarried Negro youths interviewed, 22% did not have their mother living in the home with them, and 42% reported that their father was not living in their home. 1/3 of the youth did not know their father's present occupation. The 2/3 of the sample of the 150 Negro adults did not know what the occupation of their father's father had been. 40% of the youth said that they had brothers and sisters living in other communities. Another 40% reported relatives living in their home who were not parents, siblings, or grandparents. Oh, God. Okay. Failure of youth. Williams' account of Negro youth growing up with little knowledge of their fathers, less of their father's occupation, still less of the family's occupational traditions, is in sharp contrast to the experience of white children. The white families, despite their many variants, remain a powerful agency, not only for the transmitting property from one generation to the next, but also for transmitting no less valuable contracts with the world of education and work. In an early age, the carpenters, Wainwrights, weavers, mercers, farmers, smiths acquired their names as well as their trades from their fathers and grandfathers. Children today still learn the patterns of work from their fathers, even though they may no longer go into the same job. White children without fathers at least perceive all about them the patterns of men working. Negro children without fathers flounder and fail. Not always, to be sure, the Negro family produces its share, very well possibly more than its share, of young people who have something extra that carries them over the worst obstacles. But such persons are always a minority. The common run for young people in a group facing serious obstacles to success do not succeed. A primary index of disadvantaged Negro youth in the United States is their consistently poor performance on the mental test that are standard means of measurement, ability, and performance in the present generation. This is why it's important for us to get therapy. This is why we need to go out and stop. Black folks are traditionally saying, look, he going to see a psychiatrist. He must be crazy, and it's just bad. We love talking about each other, but look, we need it. We need to go and sit down, get on the couch and have therapy. You need to spend that money on therapy. Quit taking girls trips and all this other stuff, this frivolous money, and you need to get your head together. Therapy. All right. There is absolutely no question of any genetic differential intelligence potential is distributed among Negro infants in the same proportion as among Icelanders or Chinese or any other group in American society. However, it says American society, however, impairs the Negro potential. In the statement of the Hare-U report, there is no basic disagreement over the fact that Central Harlem students are performing poorly in schools. Maybe taken as true. Negro slum children throughout the United States, 8th grade children in Central Harlem have a median IQ of 87.7, which means that perhaps a third of the children are scoring at levels perilously near those of retardation. IQ declines in the first decade of life, rising only slightly thereafter. The effect of broken families on the performance of Negro youth has not been extensively measured, but studies that have been made show an unmistakable influence. Martin Deutsch and Bert Brown, investigating intelligence test difference between Negro and white first and fifth graders of differential social classes, found that there is a different relationship between social class and IQ. As the one rises, so does the other, but more for whites than Negroes. This is surely a result of housing segregation, referred to earlier, which makes it difficult for middle-class Negroes to escape the slums. The author explains that it is much more difficult for the Negro to attain identical middle or upper middle class status with whites. The social class gradations are less marked for Negroes because Negro life in a caste society is considerably more homogeneous than is life for the majority group. Therefore, the author looks for background variables other than social class, which might explain the difference. One of the most striking differences between Negro and white groups is the consistently higher frequency of broken homes, resulting family disorganization in the Negro group. Further, they found that children from homes where fathers are present have significantly higher scores than children in homes without fathers. That data still is the same today. The influence of the father's presence was then tested within the social classes. The school grades for Negroes alone, they found that a consistent trend within both grades at the lower SES social class levels appears. In no case is there a reversal of this trend. For males, females, and combined group, the IQs of children with fathers in the home are always higher than those who have no father in the home. The author says that broken homes may account for some of the differences between Negro and white intelligence scores. The scores of fifth graders with fathers absent were lower than the scores of first graders with the father absent. Okay. All right, I'm gonna pass this. I'm gonna let y'all read that. Okay, let's get down here in Negro Youth. A study of Negro apprenticeship in New York State Commission Against Discrimination in 1960 concluded Negro youth are seldom exposed to influences which can lead to apprenticeship. Negroes are not apt to have relatives, friends, or neighbors in skilled occupations, nor are they likely to be in secondary schools where they receive encouragement and direction from alternate role models. Within the minority community, skilled Negro models after whom the Negro youth might pattern themselves are rare, while substitute sources which could provide the direction, encouragement, and resources and information needed to achieve skilled craft standing are non-existent. Okay, now that part right there is what kind of strikes me. And I know everybody talks about single mothers and all that kind of stuff, but these kids, man, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the problem is, but I mean, all the data shows that these kids are doomed, and without some kind of intervention, a coach or, somebody, these kids are doomed, man. I mean, look at what's happening in the manosphere and how guys are sharing information that even their fathers didn't know to help them to try to prosper better and to try to keep themselves out of bad situations with women. I mean, it's needed, man. We're going to have to figure this out. Okay, delinquency and crime, the combined impact of poverty, failure, and isolation among Negro youth has had a predictable outcome in a disastrous delinquency and crime rate. In particular, patterns of discrimination, Negro children in all public and private orphanages are a smaller proportion of all children than the proportion of the population, although their needs are clearly greater. On the other hand, Negroes represent a third of all the youth in training schools for juvenile delinquents. It is probable that at present, the majority of the crimes against the person, such as rape, murder, aggravated assault, are committed by Negroes. There is, of course, no absolute evidence. Inference can only be made from arrest and prison population statistics. So see, he didn't even in this report, they didn't even believe that all of those crimes were actually real crimes, and that's probably because of historical precedent. That's because of vagrancy laws and all of that. And we still see, we see to this day that a lot of those convictions are not real. Okay, the data that follow the chart are not reproduced, unquestionably are biased against Negroes who are arraigned much more casually than whites, but it may be doubted that the bias is great enough to affect the general proportions. Okay, so in short, that's what I already said. Okay, still going down with crimes. I'm going to pass all of this up because, y'all can go through all of that. Okay. An examination of the family background of 44,000. Okay. All right. Well, we'll go up here. We'll read a little bit of this. Okay. Talks about segregation. A Yale University study of the youth in the lowest socioeconomic class in New Haven in 1950, whose behavior was followed through an 18th year, reveal that among the delinquents in the group, 38% came from broken homes compared to 24% of non-delinquent homes. So still following down the same line of thought. Okay, the President's Task Force on Manpower Conservation in 1963 found that of young men rejected for the draft for failure to pass a mental test, 42% of those were with a court record came from broken homes, compared with 30% of those without a court record. Half of all of the non-white rejectees in the study with the court record came from broken homes. So we see that, the data shows that pretty much the same result will happen whether you're white or you're black, but a little bit more so if you're black. An examination of the family background of 44,448 delinquency cases in Philadelphia between 1949 to 1954 documents the frequency of both homes among delinquents. 62% of Negro delinquents and 36% of white delinquents were not living with both parents. In 1950, 33% of non-white children and 7% of white children in Philadelphia were living in homes without both parents. Repeaters were even more likely to be from broken homes than first-time offenders. Okay, the armed forces. The ultimate mark of inadequate preparation for life is the failure rate on the Armed Forces mental test. Wow. Okay. The Armed Forces mental forces qualification test is not quite a mental test, nor yet an education test. It is a test of ability to perform at an acceptable level of competency. It roughly measures the ability that ought to be found in the average 7th or 8th grade student. A grown young man who cannot pass this test is in trouble. 56% of Negroes fail it. This is a rate almost 4 times that of non-whites. The Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines conduct by far the largest and most important education, training, and training activities of the federal government, as well as the largest single source of employment in the nation. The military service is disruptive in some respects for those comparatively few who are killed or wounded in combat, and otherwise the personal sacrifice is inestimable. Inestimable? Okay. I don't know if they did that right. But anyway, but on balance, service in the armed forces over the past quarter century has worked greatly to the advantage of those involved. The training and experience of military duty itself is unique. The advantage that have generally followed in the form of the GI Bill, mortgage guarantees, federal life insurance, civil service preference, veterans hospitals, and veterans pensions are singular to say the least. Okay, although service in the armed forces is at least nominal, a duty of all male citizens among coming of age, it is clear that the present system does not enable Negroes to serve in anything like their proportionate numbers. This is not a question of discrimination. Induction into the armed forces is based on a variety of objective tests and standards, but these tests nonetheless have the effect of keeping the number of Negroes disproportionately small. So it's discrimination without saying it's discrimination. Okay. All righty. Okay. I'll skip that other part. It was just basically says that blacks constitute 8% of the armed forces today. Well, that's back then in 1963. Okay. In 1964, Negroes constitute 11.8% of the population, but probably remain at 8% of the armed forces. Okay. Just saying the same thing he was saying up there. Okay. Okay, we'll skip on down. In food, dress, and housing pay work, the Negro in the armed forces is equal and is treated that way. Okay. There is another special quality about military service for Negro men. It is an utterly masculine world, given the strains of disorganized and matrifocal family life in which so many Negro youth come of age. The armed forces are a dramatic and desperately needed change. A world away from women, a world run by strong men and of unquestioned authority, where discipline, if harsh, is nonetheless orderly and predictable, and where rewards, if limited, are granted on the basis of performance. And this is very important. I talk about this all the time on my channel, where, you know, these places where black men used to be able to exist and be men and learn from men and be mentored by men. All these places have been destroyed because it's called toxic masculinity. You know, all male clubhouses for golfing and all that stuff. All that stuff's gone because it's toxic masculinity. But you know who's saying it's toxic? Women are saying it's toxic because they want in there. They want to know what you're talking about. They want to be involved in that process, even though it has nothing to do with male and female interaction. It's about male interaction. It has nothing to do with gayness or any of that. It's just what needs to happen in order for a man to conduct himself as a man. to get the confidence of a man, to be able to do what he must to make it in the world. Okay, that's another important part, which is why I think the military, a lot of men go to the military and find themselves and end up being able to take care of themselves a lot better. You know, and even women who go into the military, they know what their role is, because they know what it's like to be a part of something greater than yourself, what sacrifice is, and what being a part of a team is, what truly being a team member is. That's important, because nothing in this life outside of this, not even being and playing football and any other stuff, well, playing volleyball or whatever, what the women do, that doesn't show them, that doesn't give them the same attention to detail and self-sacrifice. Okay. Whew. Y'all put in hours on this one. Okay. The theme of the current Army recruiting message states it as clearly as can be: the United States Army, you get to know what it means to feel like a man. That's what they used to say. Wow. Okay. At the recent Civil Rights Commission hearing in Mississippi, a witness testified that his Army service was, in fact, the only time he ever felt like a man. You know, a lot of men, and I'm a veteran myself, and I can attest to this. That's a place where you don't have to apologize for being a man. You know, and having a strong bond with people that you might die with, or that you might live through hell with, and a lot of women make fun of that, who haven't served in the military. Some men make fun of it too, but it's a unique experience that I feel like men need to have. And it'll stop some of this moistness out here. Oh, okay. All right. Further, he felt like a man. Yet, the majority of the Negro youth, and probably 3/4 of Mississippi Negroes, fail the selective service test and are rejected. Negro participation in armed service would be less than it is were it not for the proportionally large share of voluntary enlistments and re-enlistments. Thus, 16.3% of the Army sergeants are Negro. Alienation. The term alienation may be now have been used in too many ways to retain a clear meaning, but it will serve to sum up the equally numerous ways in which large numbers of Negro youth appear to be withdrawing from American society, something that we're still seeing now. We're seeing a lot of black folks, just withdrawing into all kinds of different, stuff now, but just shrinking away from society as a whole. Okay. All right. Okay. They looked at the census, and according to the Census Bureau in 1963, there are only 87 non-white white males for every 100 females in the 30 to 34 year age group. The ratio does not exceed 90 to 100 throughout 25 to 44-year-old age bracket. In the urban Northeast, there are only 76 males per 100 females. 20 to 24 years of age, and males as a percent of females are below 90% throughout all of the of ages after 14. There are not really fewer men than women in 20 to 40 age bracket. What obviously is involved is an error in counting. The surveyors simply do not find the Negro man. Donald J. Bogue and his associates, who have studied the federal court and Negro man, placed the error as high as 19.8% at the age of 28. Typically, the error of around 15% is estimated from the age of 19 through 43. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to skip through some of this too. Let's see. Okay, now they start talking about drug use. Okay, in turn. because of the new housing pattern, most of which has been financially assisted by the federal government, it is probable that the American school system has become more rather than less segregated in the past two decades. So you're talking about the school system and the toll that it was taking on black men. Okay, the only religious movement that appears to have established considerable number of lower class Negro males in northern cities of late is that of the Black Muslim movement, based on the total rejection of white society, even though it emulates whites more. In a word, the tangle of pathology is tightening. Okay, now he talks about the case for national action. First, we must reach an agreement that on what the problem is. Then we will know what question must be answered. Okay. Okay, he's rehashing some of the same information. Since 1960, however, for the first time, unemployment declined, but the number of AFDC cases rose. In 1963, this happened a second time, 1964. Okay, so that's Moynihan scissors again. Okay. Okay, it says, however, the argument of this paper does lead to one central conclusion. Whatever the specific elements of the national effort designed to resolve this problem, those elements must coordinate in the terms of general strategy, of one general strategy. What then is the problem? We feel the answer is clear enough. 3 centuries of injustice have brought about deep-seated structural distortions in the life of the American Negro. At this point, the present tangle of pathology is capable of perpetuating itself without assistance from the white world. The cycle can be broken if these distortions are set right. Okay. Okay, in a word, the national effort towards the problems of the Negro Americans must be directed towards the question of family structure. Okay, so he's saying that basically the family structure need to be strengthened. Okay, the fundamental importance and the urgency of restoring the Negro American family structure has been evident for some time. E. Franklin Frazier puts it most succinctly in 1950. As the result of the family disorganization, a large proportion of Negro children and youth have not undergone the socialization which only the family can provide. The disorganization, families have failed to provide for the emotional needs and have not provided the discipline and habits which are necessary for personality development, because the disorganized family has failed in its function as a socializing agency. It has handicapped the children in their relationships, in their relations to the institutions in the community. Moreover, family disorganization has been partially responsible for a large amount of juvenile delinquency and adult crime among Negroes. Since the widespread family disorganization among Negroes has resulted from the failure of the father to play the role in family life required by American society, the mitigation of this problem must await those changes in the Negro and American society which will enable the Negro father to play the role required of him. Nothing was done in response to Frazier's argument. Matters were left to care of themselves, and as matters grew worse, not better. The problem is not more serious, the obstacles greater. There is, however, a profound change for the better in one respect. The president has committed the nation to an all-out effort to eliminate poverty wherever it exists among whites or Negroes, and a militant organization and organized and responsible Negro movement exists to join in that effort. Ooh, y'all. Ooh, such national effort could be stated thus. The policy of the United States is to bring the Negro American to full and equal share in the responsibilities and rewards of citizenship. To this end, the programs of the federal government bearing on this objective shall be designed to have the effort directly and indirectly of enhancing the stability and the resources of the Negro American family. Okay, now it shows all of the references for the report. But basically, what he's saying is simple. It is that if you don't strengthen the black male's position in order for him to be able to take care of his family and to care for the children in the proper way and to be the leader of that household, these problems will persist. These problems have been going on since E. Franklin Frazier's time, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now the 2000s. So when are we going to go ahead and put the money where the money is supposed to be? Oh my God, this has been 2 hours. Hopefully you guys will be able to stick with this. Whoo! Oh my God. I came home, straight home from work, and I started working on this. I tried to get it all into one package so that you guys wouldn't have to watch multiples. I probably should have broke it up. But here it is. I'm not gonna go any further than that. And I'm gonna go ahead and let it drop in the morning. But this is it. It's all connected. It's all explained in this. I will put into the comments everything that you guys will want to see from this, and you can judge for yourself. People say that this was a racist report, but I don't know how it can be racist when it took from a black man's data and his findings and basically supported his conclusions. So you guys tell me what you think. Please like, share, and subscribe. Man, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm finna go to sleep. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me.
You are listening to Abuki Kabah, the analytical savage.
It's been great, man. I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna try to work on some more stuff for y'all. Probably go back to some medical stuff and some little bit shorter stuff. This wore me out. I hope you guys like it. I hope it helps, because you guys are gonna need this to fight all these disingenuous claims from the color purple and the females out here trying to say that we kept them down and they had to get out here and work, and all these other myths that they're perpetuating out here to make you feel bad. Don't let them do that to you. This is Abuki Kabal. Some know me as Rodney, and I appreciate you guys hanging out with me.
I feel like a